Hi, I'm Kip Walby, and thanks for joining me on another Mayor's Corner. I thought we'd actually talk to the superintendents. We're going to do over the next maybe 7, 8, 9 months. We're going to talk to each of the different school districts, and up first is Lakeview. So we're glad to have Karl Paulson here, the superintendent of Lakeview. Karl, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start out with a little bit maybe personal view. How long you been at Lakeview, and kind of give us your background.
Great. I've been at Lakeview 17 years.
Wow, that went fast.
Yes, it has. 12 years as superintendent now. This is my 12th year, and it's been a great ride, I have to say.
Fantastic. I mean, a lot of changes, right, in those 17 years?
Yes, the student population has grown. We've improved a lot of programs. There's been a lot of change in the state budget system, in funding, a lot of things that impact the schools and impact the city, because if we have great schools, we have a great city.
For sure. So you started off talking a little bit about funding. I mean, that seems to be a big issue, right? I mean, for state-wise. I mean, no matter what governor comes in or who runs, it's roads, but it's also funding for the schools. Talk about that. I mean, it's a big problem.
Well, interestingly, we are in the second, third week of September, and we have not had a state budget solved yet. The state's budget actually starts October 1st. Our school district budgets start July 1st. So there's always a lag before we really know what's happening for our own school budget and the situation per pupil funding. Per pupil funding has been growing slowly, but not keeping up with inflation over the last decade. And that's impacted schools pretty dramatically because energy costs go up, healthcare costs go up, all the other things we spend funds on have gone up, and if our foundation allowance doesn't keep up, then we have to do some other things or be creative and innovative. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of Lakeview's staff and our leadership team and our board. We find ways to keep the mission as our focus, and we put our money on our mission primarily.
So do all schools get the same amount of money?
They do not. Thank you for asking. There's a funding system that's kind of historically connected back to 1994 when Proposal A passed. School districts throughout the state were very different in the funding structure. And so part of the purpose behind Proposal A in 1994 was to bring most of the schools to an equal funding level over time. The goals were the right goals, but the economic reality of Michigan over the last 30 years hasn't necessarily allowed us to achieve those goals. So you have school districts, even within a 10-mile radius of here, some of whom are at about $8,000 a student, and others who are still much higher than that at $11,000 or $12,000 a student. When you have a 40 or a 50% difference in the per pupil funding, you're going to have dramatic differences in what programs they might offer, or the way they might compensate staff, or the extracurricular things they're able to offer as part of their programming.
Is that because a district has voted that way?
It was historically sort of where the districts were. Some districts had a lot of business property. Other districts had just a lot of residential property. In the old days of funding based on a millage and a local vote, you could have a very high millage and be collecting a lot per pupil. And that when the tax change happened in 1994, there was kind of that historical stop point. And that difference between highs and lows is kind of where we're still trying to catch up.
And the state recognizes this problem, and how do they address it?
Well, politics gets in the way a lot of times for what might be the right thing to do, because they have a limited pot of money. If you're not going to change the pot of money, then you have to distribute it in a certain way. And that's one of the confusing things, I think, to a lot of voters, because it's not common to necessarily follow closely state politics and to follow how the funding system for schools is set up. When you go backwards and you look at what Proposal A did and the way we're funded today, you have that gap there, and you have the intent to close that gap between the rich districts, if you will, and the poorer districts, but you don't have necessarily the political will to generate the kind of revenue that's going to close that gap. It's the same issue with roads. The governor has spoken to the road question over the course of her campaign and now and when she's in office. You have to have the revenue in order to generate $2 billion to fix roads. There has to be the political will to do that. In our case with schools, that revenue pot is the school aid fund at the state level. The legislature every year has to make a decision about dividing up the pot and what categorical funds it's going to display, what per pupil amount it's going to displace, and whether or not how much difference there'll be in the district distributions, because there's 500 school districts and 100 and some charters, and all of them have a part of that pot. When it's all said and done, the old days of local votes and millages and collecting the dollars at the city of St. Clair Shores,
right,
and then handing that money back to the school district locally, that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
And that's the big change that a lot of people don't realize. This income tax, the sales tax, 2 cents to the sales tax comes to the school aid fund, the 6 mil state education tax, that's a line item on everybody's property tax bill, 6 mil state education tax. The city of St. Clair Shores is the collection agent, but the state of Michigan is the repository, not Lakeview Public Schools,
right,
or Lakeshore South Lake. It's the state, and then that money is redistributed out in the head count. So head count is now what matters, not necessarily local property tax values and those sorts of things. Statewide, property tax value matters a lot because 6 mils statewide is what's collected for state education tax. Income tax matters because statewide income tax is collected and the schools get part of that. A lot of people say, oh, what about the lottery? That's going to save us. The lottery generates, $800 million out of a $15 billion school aid fund at the state level. So 7, 8, 9% of our funds are lottery. It's not the end-all, be-all solution.
right,
And there's probably not one simple solution, funding schools. It's partly, we'll walk back 50 years, the way the state's tax structure used to be was generating lots of revenue from manufacturing and the interchange between those kinds of businesses and the taxes that they paid on that business activity. We don't have 80% economic activity that's manufacturing in Michigan anymore.
right,
It's about 20%. And so when you think of services that aren't taxed the same way as the old days where business manufacturing was taxed, that's part of the revenue generation issue at the state level. And of course, the state level pot is what matters to public schools. It's no longer the local property tax base. It has some impact when you talk about bond issues or other things, but it's a lot less impacting in terms of we don't have, I pay my taxes to St. Clair Shores and my school should get that money. Well, you may feel that way, but that's not how it works anymore.
right. Talk a little bit about test scores and how Lakeview is I guess, ranking there and how
Yes,
things
thank you.
are in Macomb County.
We feel very good about those. I was at our school board meeting last night and I gave some accolades to our teaching staff and our principals because this year the tests that the state required us to take M-STEP.
So these are standardized,
It's
right?
the standardized test
everybody
every student in Michigan takes,
Okay.
3rd through 8th grade and 11th grade. So those M-STEP scores are the old MEP, for some folks that
Right.
might remember the MEP scores. The M-STEP scores this year were tested in 17 areas, grade levels and contents. So English, language, arts, and math for all the grade levels. A couple of grade levels had social studies also. Science is in a year where they're piloting a new test, so those weren't counted this year. But out of those 17 scores, 16 of those we beat the state and county averages. So Lakeview's residents and our parents and kids can be very proud of the fact that we're working with less funds over a long period of time, but we're delivering some pretty good outcomes for kids in terms of programming and the commitment that we've got for putting our money on the mission.
Right.
That's a historical trend. We have a couple of schools that probably have #1 scores in all of Macomb County. And our 5th grade Ardmore math score is probably #1 for all elementaries in Macomb County.
That's fantastic.
Greenwood Elementary reading and ELA score in 3rd grade.
ELA, what's that?
English Language Arts.
Okay.
Probably a #1 score for all elementary schools in Macomb County. Those kind of outcomes come from very focused effort, hard work, commitment of parents, commitment of teachers on a daily basis, and refining, what the curriculum is, how we deliver that curriculum, training teachers to do things better, and that's all part of Money on the Mission.
I don't know. Can anyone go to Greenwood or Ardmore? I mean, if I used to, when I lived on Alexander, I happened to go to St. Joan, but Ardmore was my school. But I did go there for a while. I mean, is that how it still works?
So that's a good question. We have in the recent past, the state passed several different laws that allow school districts, if they choose, to have a couple of different ways that families could choose a different school than where they live. One of those is called internal school of choice, where if you have multiple different elementaries and you may have multiple different middle schools and multiple different high schools in a single school district, you can allow students, if the board chooses, to have what's called internal school of choice. So a student from an Ardmore Elementary could go to a Greenwood Elementary,
Okay.
or a student from Greenwood could go to Harmon. And sometimes families want to do those things for a whole variety of reasons. Grandma lives close to an elementary school, so she's going to babysit after school.
Right.
I want to have my child go to that school, and across the street they can stay after school with grandma. Other reasons, I work close by, across town. I can, I'm just a few steps away. I can park at work and walk my kid back to the school. Those little things make a difference for a lot of families, and those things are things our board has decided to allow and accommodate that choice if families want to and if seats are available. Another option of school of choice as an idea is external school of choice, and there's 2 different varieties of that, and the state passed that law a number of years ago. Every school district in Macomb County right now is open to the concept of outside school of choice. So you can actually attend, if there are seats available and what procedures the districts each have, you can attend a different school that's not your resident school district. So a Lakeview student could attend a South Lake school, a South Lake student could attend a Lakeview school. And so our district in 2004 allowed for that. We weren't the first in St. Clair Shores to do that. But we started to do that in 2004, and that has continued to this day. Again, one of the things there is you have some ability to restrict entry because you have to choose your seat counts. You can identify how many seats you have available. You can also restrict travel between districts based on past discipline. So a student who's a discipline problem doesn't necessarily have the option to be in a choice program. And Lakeview has exercised that part of the law vigorously. We will not have a student from another district attend who has a suspension in another school district or an expulsion or anything serious like that. And so that has helped, I think, in the broader picture of a family who wishes to attend a school outside of their resident school. We have a number of those in Lakeview. Many of those are from St. Clair Shores families that are in the other districts. Many of those are from East Point or Roseville. We have people from as far away as New Haven, and again, that's one of the stories is a family who actually drives to St. Clair Shores for work.
Right.
And that family from New Haven chooses to Lakeview because they work close by, and that's a better situation for their family. So many times those are the reasons people are doing
Or they move in the 11th grade and they want to finish out 10th and 11th
Yes,
or 12th
absolutely.
grade. That's not uncommon.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, many times our programming will be of desire. Lakeview's extracurricular programs have now started. The sports teams have been winning. A number of different sports teams have been winning the last few years, so that draws people in because they're interested in that kind of activity. The academic scores will draw people to Lakeview and impact, the enrollment. Obviously, we have a high school program that's unique in Michigan. We have what is called college dual enrollment. All high schools are allowed to do this. You have to, set up your own rules internally, and you have to have relationships with colleges or universities. And Macomb Community College is one of our partners. Wayne State University is one of our partners, and Baker College is one of our partners in our dual enrollment structure. We have a high school block hybrid schedule. That's a unique structure for how the student's day operates, where they can have 4 90-minute classes in simple terms. And those 90-minute blocks allow for college dual enrollment to work better because many of the college classes are 2 days a week for 90 minutes. So we have engaged partnerships with Wayne State and Baker in particular, and they are actually on our campus. They're either running classes at the high school campus itself, or they may be running a few of their classes at the Wheat building, which is right next to our high school where our administration is at. Those college dual enrollment opportunities, that's thousands of dollars of tuition that the school district pays on behalf of the student. And in Lakeview's case, because of the hybrid block schedule and those direct relationships with those providers, we have literally hundreds of students dual enrolled every year between 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It's really a fascinating sight at graduation every year, the last few years. When I ask the students in their seats, I have all the caps and gowns out in front of me in one big block in the auditorium at Lakeview, and I ask them, all seniors, if you have had a college dual enrollment class, earning college credit, or an advanced placement class while you've been in high school, stand up. And 60% of the student body stands up. Nothing like that happens anywhere else in Michigan. Every other district has the chance to do that, and every other district has some kids that do that, but not in the kind of percentages we're talking about.
Well, and so my son graduated from Lakeview in 2018. And
great choice.
Yep. And he got 15 hours, Wayne State, and it all transferred perfectly. He went to Ferris State, but to have 15 hours of Wayne State credit was fantastic. And to be honest with you, I was like, oh, well, I hope they take it all. And Carl, they take it no problem. And you're right to save a lot. And on top of it, I'm like, well, listen, Tommy, you got 15 hours. You better graduate in 4 years. I mean, you already got a semester in here. So
yes.
It's that savings you say there. And I think many times the savings at the back end, because a lot of kids don't get out now in 4 years. So,
yes.
You get 15 hours, you get a full semester. You get good reason to tell the boy, you better get done.
Well, and the other part, the other beautiful part of that is the student as a junior who's taking one class or 2 classes
Yep.
and has the rest of their high school schedule, we have the ability to support them a little differently than if they're a freshman off at campus somewhere. And so that transition between when I'm a high school student versus a college student, the transition of getting the experience of going through that course.
Yep.
And okay, I'm not checking homework anymore.
Right.
You're going to have 2 tests or 3 tests,
Right.
and that's going to be your grade.
Yep.
It's a great transition for those students, and we build on that.
Right. And when he came home one time, because they have the professors from Wayne State, and he took it at Wheat, and I was glad to just stay locally in St. Clair Shores and go to Wheat. And the professor was, hey, boys and girls, this is college now. And they get indoctrinated to the real life of college, and it's good.
Well, I had a few years ago, we were doing a strategic planning process, and a parent wanted to stand up. I was explaining the dual enrollment as a part of an overview, and this parent stood up because he knew he had to share with the crowd, 60 people in this gym. He knew he had to share this story because, Mr. Paulson, you're missing something else that's really important. And I was thinking to myself, oh gosh, what's he going to say?
Right, yeah, I know the feeling.
And he said, he didn't tell me to say this. And I said, oh boy, it's even getting better. So he stood up and he shared that his son had graduated that previous spring, and he had done a bunch of dual enrollment, advanced placement at Lakeview, and he earned a scholarship to his college. And the scholarship was 4-year scholarship. And he was, he's going to finish his bachelor's degree in 2 years.
Fantastic.
And the college counselor said, you have 2 more years of a scholarship. You better start your graduate school program.
Wow, that's great.
And this, Dad was very pleased about that whole experience. And again, it's nowhere else in Michigan are kids getting that chance. And we're very proud of that.
For sure.
We're proud of the kids that take advantage of it, and their parents who push them to make sure that they stay on track.
Yep.
And get those extra credits done so we can pay for that. That's part of the dual enrollment programs.
Absolutely. Now I know with the few minutes that we have left, you got a bond issue coming up, right, in November.
Yes.
Talk about what that is, what that means to residents, what you're planning to do.
So every so often, you continuously evaluate your facility situations, and facilities and equipment, large equipment and roofs and things of that nature. And so Lakeview has been very conscious of that over the years. We had a bond issue in 2001, did a lot of things to update the buildings that were kind of behind the scenes. We had another bond issue in 2007, a small one, that was focused more on security updates, several other things, athletic field update. And so now we've come to the realization that there's a lot of projects coming in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years that will never be able to be covered by the general fund budget. That 8,000 something per kid
Right.
is not enough funds to cover $5 million worth of roofing, or replacing the athletic turf at the high school, replacing all the heating and cooling systems in all the buildings, because they're going to be 20 or 25 years old. And so it's time for us to then evaluate what kind of funding sources are available to do that kind of work. And there's really two only available, sinking fund or a bond. And our board did about an 18-month evaluation of their options, what our project list would require and expect to have over the next 5 years, and basically came to the reality that a big bond issue is going to be necessary to take us to the next 25 or 30 years in Lakeview. So it's a $54 million bond issue. It's very restricted and controlled money. The district actually has to apply to the State Department of Treasury with an application that outlines all of the details of what we want to do with our bond. They define a lot of procedural things where you have to have expert architects and consultants defining how much your dollar figures are estimated to be.
Sure.
So it's not somebody making up a dollar amount and saying, oh, let's go for that. And the project list is specified, so you can only use the bond funds for the things that are in your project list. So the board had to look at those things, approve that. The Department of Treasury had to look at those things, approve that. And then the board could vote again to send a ballot language to the voters for them to approve it.
What are some of the projects?
So you have all roofing in every school. 7 sites we have in Lakeview, all the roofing, all the heating and cooling equipment, all the computer equipment, and all the infrastructure that ties those things together.
Right.
The wireless ports, the cabling, the switches and servers. And when you talk about 4,000, some student machines and all the devices kids could be carrying and staff could be carrying, getting on a wireless system, what we put in 2007 was good at the time, but not every person carried a cell phone in 2007. Today, everybody expects to be able to hook to your Wi-Fi. So updating our facilities to be in the 21st century,
Sure.
Like our programming is.
Yep.
Some of the other things, when we have, space considerations, a general classroom at the elementary school is 900 square feet. And those facilities are pretty restrictive of what you can do and how you do it. And teaching and learning today, we're much more innovative about how we go about that work. And kids do a lot of group work and interacting, and you need space to do that in. So each of the elementary schools has 2 classrooms, 2 classroom addition on their corners of their buildings, to build multi-purpose spaces that can be used for those sorts of things. Specials classes that are bigger. We have orchestra and band in 5th grade through all the way up. And that's another unique thing about Lakeview's programming. Well, those kids need a space to do that in. A 900 square foot classroom doesn't work
Right.
when you have a trombone.
Sure.
So those spaces are important. In addition, at the middle school, we're really at capacity in terms of student population at the middle school in Lakeview. So we have a 6 classroom addition at that building. All the schools will have site work to improve traffic flow. I know it's in our interest and the city's
For sure.
if we can improve the traffic flow around the elementary schools in particular. The reality is the elementary schools, the footprint and the parking and the driveways are exactly the way they were in 1955 when they were first built.
Well, time for
We're
change.
not a 21st century district if we have 1955 campuses at the elementaries. So the driveways and bump outs on the sides of the roads to improve the resident area traffic flow to bring cars off the roads, put them in our parking lots, expand our parking lots at our elementaries. We have land at our elementary campuses to do those things, so those things are going to be accomplished very nicely.
Tell us as we wrap up with a minute, what does it mean to the taxpayer? What does it mean to
So
them?
this is a no new tax necessary. We actually have the financing structured in such a way that we'll be able to, old debt will fall off when the new debt starts, and we will have a no tax increase bond. And that's usually pretty appealing to folks when they know that we don't have to pay more. This is going to be able to take us 25 years down the road and we won't have to pay more, and that's exactly the case.
Sounds good. There's a lot of good things at Lakeview. Again, I can say for the years that we were there, it was terrific. So I think you guys are doing a great job over there. And you are right. Strong schools makes a strong community, and it is important. And I think we work well together, so it's important to have that. So we appreciate everything you do over at Lakeview.
Well, I appreciate the relationship we've had and the relationship with the city that we continue to have.
Sounds good.
Good times ahead.
Very good. I agree with you. So with that, I'm Kip Walby, and thanks for joining me on another Mayor's Corner, and we'll see you around the town.
Hi, I'm Blair Gilbert for Gilbert's Pro Hardware in the south end of St. Clair Shores and MrHardware.com with a quick tip, how to rewind the spool on your weed whacker. So when you go to replace the line on your weed whacker, or line trimmer as it's called, you need to find out that one, you can get the same size line as what was on your old weed whacker. So typically it's a .065 line. There's a residential line, there's a commercial line. For like $1 more, don't fool around, get the commercial line. So we've chosen our line, we've got a spool. We want to get about 9 feet of this. We're in the garage, we don't have tape measure, we don't care. So when we pull it out of here, we want this to spin free. You just throw the spool on the ground, and then give me an arm reach, and then give me a nose reach, and that's going to be enough. That's about 9 feet, that's all we care about. We cut the line. So you take the line, this particular unit has a slot and a little receiver hole that the line was in that I noticed when I took the old line out. I pull the line tight, just like that, so we have a good, clean starter there. And we have this arrow. The arrow is everything. This is why so many people go wrong. You wind with the arrow. Don't outsmart the arrow. And then for the sake of filming, we took and used silver marker and we highlighted the arrow so it's easy to see. But it'll be dark when you get yours and it'll be hard to see. And you just take your time and wind the line around the spool as neat as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, just semi-nice. And if this was a dual, this is a single string line trimmer. If this was a dual string line trimmer, I'd simply be doing both lines at once like this, where I was holding both lines and I just spin the spool and wind it around. So either way, we get it wound up, we get to the bitter end, and there's a little keeper on a lot of these. I can pull the line into that slot that's there. And I pull the line in the slot, that holds the line for me, so as I install it, I put it in, I snap it in place. Now the line didn't unspool or tangle or anything go wrong. I take my cap, I line it up. All these caps are different. That's it, I'm ready to go. Now every time it bumps, it will feed line, and away we go. Quick, easy tip, wind your weed whacker yourself from Mr. Hardware and Gilbert's Pro Hardware in St. Clair Shores.
My name is Michelle Zatorsky. I am one of the owners here at Soulier Landscaping and Garden Center. It is a family-owned business. We do deliver everything that we carry. We have a full line of patio furniture. We sell nursery stock, trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals. We have bulk material that's held in the yard across the street that was our original location. I'd like you to invite you into the store. We'd love to help you plan and design your landscape projects. We'd love to see you and hope to see you soon.